I was 27 years old, standing in the middle of a life that looked completely fine, and I felt nothing. Not sadness, not happiness, just a strange, flat emptiness that had no obvious cause and no obvious solution. And that absence of feeling scared me more than any particular feeling ever had. It took me another 8 months after that moment to understand what was actually wrong. And when I finally did, the answer was so simple and so devastating at the same time that I almost did not know what to do with it. I had never been living my own life. Not really, not in any of the ways that actually count. My name is Sean. I am 30 now, and what I am about to tell you is something that I think more people are living through right now than would ever admit it out loud. I grew up in a family where expectations were not spoken aggressively, but they were present in a way that was impossible to miss. My father had built a career in finance, and there was a quiet assumption, never stated directly but always in the room, that I would do something similarly respectable. Something that made sense on paper. Something that other people would understand and approve of when asked at a dinner table. I was a compliant kid. Not out of fear exactly. More because I had learned early that compliance produced warmth and warmth felt good and the equation seemed simple enough to follow. I was good at school in the subjects that mattered to the people around me. I went to a university that my parents were proud of. I studied something practical. I graduated and found a job in a field that was stable and well regarded and completely, thoroughly wrong for me. I did not know it was wrong for me at first. Or maybe I did and chose not to examine it. The line between not knowing and not looking is thinner than most people admit. For the first 2 years after graduating, I told myself the dissatisfaction was just adjustment. That everyone found the early years of their career hard and I was no different. I threw myself into performing competence in a field I had no real connection to and got reasonably good at it in the surface ways that look like success. I received decent reviews. I got a small promotion. People told me I was doing well and I accepted that as evidence that I was, in fact, doing well. But something underneath all of that was very quietly wrong. I could feel it in the mornings most clearly. There was a specific quality to how I woke up that I came to recognize as something other than tiredness. It was not physical exhaustion. It was more like my whole body knew before my mind had a chance to intervene that I was about to spend another day in a life that did not fit, and it was registering its objection in the only way it could. I ignored it. For years I ignored it. Because what was the alternative? Admitting that the path I had followed, the one everyone around me had approved of and supported and in some cases actively shaped, was not mine. That felt like a much bigger problem than whatever quiet wrongness I was carrying. So I managed. I organized my inner life around the performance of being fine. I showed up to work and to family gatherings and to social situations and gave every external indication that things were going well. And internally I kept moving the question further down the list, telling myself I would deal with it when things settled, when I had more time, when I was more certain of what I actually wanted. Things did not settle. The question did not go away. It just got louder in proportion to how long I tried to ignore it. My closest friend during this time was a guy named Luca, who was 28. He had known me since university and was one of the few people I was genuinely honest with, or at least more honest with than I was with most. Even with Luca though, I kept the full picture back. I told him work was fine. I told him I was figuring things out. I did not tell him that some mornings I sat in my car in the office car park for 10 minutes before going in because I needed that time to prepare myself for a day that should not have required preparation. I did not tell anyone that. Then something happened when I was 27 that I did not see coming and did not process in the usual ways. My company offered a voluntary redundancy package as part of a restructure. I was not at risk. My role was secure, but the option was there and something in me responded to it in a way that surprised me deeply. Not with anxiety about the uncertainty. With something that felt uncomfortably close to relief. Like a door had appeared in a wall I had stopped believing contained any doors. I did not take the package immediately, but the feeling it produced in me sat in my chest for weeks and refused to leave. I kept returning to it and examining it and asking myself what it meant that the prospect of leaving felt like breathing out after holding my breath for a very long time. What happened next changed the direction of everything. I took 2 weeks of annual leave and spent most of it alone, deliberately. Not traveling anywhere significant, just at home, with space and quiet and no performance required of me. And for the first time in years I let myself actually think. Not productively, not toward any particular answer, just honestly, about what I wanted, about what I was doing and why, about the gap between the life I was living and the life that, if I stripped away every external expectation and every fear of disappointing someone, I would actually choose. The first few days of that leave were uncomfortable in a way I had not anticipated. I had been so practiced at filling time with purpose that sitting without an agenda felt almost wrong. But I stayed with it, and slowly, the noise of performance quieted enough that something underneath it became audible. I had always been interested in working with people in a direct and meaningful way. Not through reports or systems or financial processes but in actual human contact. I had gravitated toward it naturally at university, in the part-time work I had done and the conversations I had sought out and the things I found genuinely engaging when nobody was evaluating my choices. I had a long-standing interest in counseling and psychology that I had never pursued seriously because it had not fit the blueprint. It had not been the respectable, stable, financially sensible option. So I had filed it away and followed the blueprint and spent 5 years being competent at something I did not care about. Sitting alone in my apartment during those 2 weeks, with nowhere to be and nothing to prove, that truth became impossible to keep at arm's length. I called Luca on the 5th day, and for the first time I gave him the full picture. Not the managed version, the real one. I told him about the mornings in the car park. I told him about the flatness. I told him about the 2 weeks and what I had been sitting with and what I was beginning to understand about the choices I had made and why I had made them. He listened without interrupting for a long time, and when I finished he said something I have not forgotten. He said it sounded like I had spent 5 years being very loyal to other people's idea of who I should be, and he wondered what would happen if I tried being that loyal to my own. That sentence landed somewhere deep. Because loyalty was something I understood. I had just been pointing it entirely in the wrong direction. I did not make any immediate dramatic decisions. I want to be honest about that because I think there is a version of this kind of story that presents a single moment of clarity followed by instant transformation, and that is not how it happened. What happened was slower and messier and required a sustained kind of courage that did not feel heroic from the inside. Over the following months I began researching a retraining program in counseling that I could do alongside my current work. I spoke to my father about what I was considering, which was one of the most difficult conversations I had in that entire period. He did not respond the way I feared. He was quieter than I expected and more thoughtful. He said he had always wanted me to be settled and had assumed that meant financially secure. He had not considered that settled might mean something different for me. That conversation shifted something between us that had been slightly stiff for years without either of us fully naming why. I started the retraining program 7 months after those 2 weeks of leave. I am still in my original job for now, working toward the transition rather than making it all at once. It is slower than part of me wants. But it is real, it is mine, and that difference, between doing something because it fits someone else's map and doing something because it genuinely belongs to you, is not a subtle difference. It is the difference between waking up braced for the day and waking up with some actual interest in what it might contain. I am 30 now and I think about that 27-year-old standing in the middle of his fine, correct, approved life feeling nothing, fairly often. Not with judgment, more with a kind of compassion for how long he had been trying to live inside something that was never built to his shape and had never once admitted that it did not fit. If you are in a life right now that looks right from the outside but feels wrong from the inside, I want you to know that the feeling is information. It is not ingratitude, it is not weakness, it is not a phase you need to push through. It is your own inner life trying to tell you something it has probably been trying to tell you for longer than you have been willing to listen. You do not have to blow everything up. You do not have to make a dramatic decision today, but you do have to be willing to sit with the question honestly. Whose life are you actually living? And if the honest answer gives you pause, that pause is the beginning of something important. Leave a comment below and tell me if any part of this felt like your story. Tell me what you have been living inside and whether any part of you has started to wonder if it was ever really yours. This is a space where that honesty belongs. Share this with someone who might be living someone else's life without knowing it yet. Like this video and subscribe to Untold Perspectives for more stories that go to the real places most people are too busy performing to visit. You are allowed to want a life that actually fits. Start there and see where it leads.